Alright, hello everybody. This should be the Friday video, sort of Judaism part 2. If you guys didn't get a chance to finish all the videos from yesterday, I would encourage you all to watch them at the conclusion of this presentation. And then also, if there is extra time at the end of class today and you have watched all the videos, get on that religious coloring, which is really awesome. Okay, so this is where we finished off yesterday. I would ask some students what you remember from yesterday. So, I don't know, substitute if you want to run that real quick, pause the video, ask kids what they remember, ask them some basic questions about Judaism. But otherwise, let's get on into it. So, now let me talk about the history of the early Jewish people. The Jewish kingdoms of Israel and Judea existed between 1000 to 500 BCE. And this was definitely the golden age of the Jewish people. Sadly, after this part, the Jewish people would never again primarily inhabit, or they would never really again have a country until 1948. So for most of history, they were taken away from their land. But during this brief period, things were great. So let's check it out, what was going on with the Jewish people during their golden age. Here's King David's empire, so it's sort of modern day Israel, Syria, Lebanon, parts of Jordan and Iraq. And then this is what the Jewish people were doing. Who remembers what this thing is called? Anybody? Anybody? I hope you do. Menorah is the answer. Alright, but yep, Jewish people doing their thing. This is called a dreidel, traditional Jewish toy. Okay, so what ended their golden age? Well, in 500 BC, the Babylonians came in and said, hey, Jewish people, we're taking you over. And the Jewish people had an unsuccessful war defending themselves, but the Babylonians took over and pretty much enslaved everybody. So they already had that story of being slaves in Egypt, but now they're slaves in Babylon. And there's all the Jewish people were sent away from their land, and there's a very famous psalm here. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept, we remembered Zion. Zion's another name for Israel. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? And this psalm really summarizes the whole sort of history of the Jewish people, because as I mentioned, they're not going to have their country again until 1948. The Jewish people they definitely got some bad luck in the course of human history, but they are a resilient people, and they are still around today, rebuilding their nation. So impressive. All right, here's the Babylonians coming in, pushing down the gates of Jerusalem, and there's the Jewish people all getting enslaved, getting sent over to Iraq, Babylon, and there they are, hanging out by the waters, feeling sorry that they couldn't go back to their homeland they love so much. Okay, eventually, the Babylonians do allow the Jews to return home. This guy, Cyrus the Great, did a great thing, let the Jews go. But they didn't really have full independence. They were sort of like a sub-country of Babylon. But then remember Alexander the Great. He comes in a couple hundred years later, and he actually takes over Israel, and the Israelis are like, hey, Alexander the Great, can you let us be independent and do our own thing? And you remember Alexander the Great was all like, everybody just get along, be a part of Super Greece. So Alexander didn't really force anything along the Jewish people, but they were sort of controlled by Greece. This other civilization I never talked about called the Seleucids came in. They took over the Israeli people. But then the Romans came in, and we've already talked about the Romans, and this is sort of where the story comes back. So the Romans took over Israel. The Jewish people were living there, but the Jewish people were still doing their own thing, still practicing their religion. And a word you got to know, rabbi, means Jewish leader. So hope you got all that down. And there's a rabbi doing his thing, blessing a baby. And Rome coming in, taking command. Okay. During that whole long period, I said, all those 100 years, the Jewish people built this super religious temple. This temple is very, very important to the Jewish people. By far their holiest site in the world. You ask any Jewish person 2,000 years ago or today, if you could have one football field on planet Earth, 100% of Jewish people would say the temple in Jerusalem. It no longer exists today, sadly, but this is what it looked like. And every year, God came into that temple and performed a miracle on their holiday of Yom Kippur. It's a holiday that sort of switches between September and October, depending on the lunar calendar. But in the Jewish temple, there was a very famous artifact called the Ark of the Covenant. It was this big chest that contained the 10 Commandments that God gave Moses. It also contained their grand menorah, this sort of like really big giant gold menorah that the Jewish people would light on their holiday of Passover. So this temple, really, really, really important. And there's the Jewish people hanging out on their holidays. This was the full size of the temple, but sort of this is the main part here. But anyway, notice this kind of big rectangular shape. This is called the Temple Mount. This is very important. Temple Mount in the middle of the temple. And there's sort of a close-up of it. It looks really fancy, a lot of gold. Jewish people super duper proud of this temple. And inside the temple, sort of in the top, I don't know, second floor here, there was a room with the chest, the Ark of the Covenant, and the super menorah. And yep, the miracle that God performed every year was the holiest Jewish rabbi would enter this room on Yom Kippur wearing white clothes, but then he would somehow emerge wearing a different color of clothes. And like people would check the room, they were like, are there any hidden clothes here? But if his clothes changed different colors, it mean different things for the I don't know, welfare of the Jewish people for the coming year. So let's check it out. Well, anyway, so Rome has taken over Israel. Jewish people are doing their thing, having their super temple. A lot of Jewish people are, you know, sort of okay with Rome. But in around the year 100 AD, there was a lot of young Jewish people who hated Rome. They said the Romans are disrespecting us. They're taking our stuff. We're the Jewish people. We've got God on our side. And also remember, the Roman emperor, Augustus, said, hey, everybody has to worship the emperor once a week. Jewish people hated that idea, said it was against their one God, against Yahweh, who's the only spiritual power in their world. So they decided to start doing terrorist acts against the Roman people living in Israel. There were these young Jewish guys called the Sicarii. That's the Hebrew word for knife, actually. And they sort of just went into Romans' houses, cut their throats, found Romans walking on the street, gave them some good old kidney stabbing. And every time they killed people, they said, you know, this is for the independence of the Jewish people. This is for Yahweh. We don't want to worship your emperor. We want to do our own thing. But if you guys remember what I taught you about Rome, Rome didn't really like it when people didn't follow their rules. And the Roman military were the best in the world, okay? So as soon as word got out of all these terrorist actions, Rome, they're going to respond, needless to say. So anyway, here's a Sicarii assassin stabbing folks. Some Roman guy is fighting off against this assassin in the middle of the night. Roman soldiers are coming in. And yeah, you know what's going to happen. Well, yeah, here's some Roman soldiers putting out a fire caused by a Sicarii. And then these are some Sicarii guys. We're going to take back our country. So in 70 AD to 136 AD, those were officially the Jewish revolts, this period of sort of mass terrorism. And eventually the Jewish people sort of do form an army and have an organized resistance against Rome. But, man, let me tell you, the Roman army came back to Judea in full force and just stomped them. Oh, man. Rome was not feeling merciful. When the Roman army came in, they just killed huge numbers of people, enslaved all the women and children they could find. They would prefer to sort of do what they did to Carthage than to try to save this province of people. They didn't salt the fields, but they did definitely kill every man they could find, and things got bad for the Jewish people. In fact, every Jewish person was either sold into slavery or forced to forever leave the land of Israel. Later on in history, some will come back, and then, of course, today the land of Israel is mostly Jewish people again. But starting in 136 A.D., Rome did not let them come back. Let's check out some of these pictures here. So here's the Roman army coming into Jerusalem, just sacking it, killing people, slaving them. Roman soldiers charging up into the temple. Here they are, just fighting back. All kinds of people trying to resist the Romans. And what does this Roman guy have here? This is something that I just showed you earlier in the presentation. But yeah, it was a pretty devastating day for the Jewish people when the Roman army came in full force and almost wiped them out. And yes, Rome totally destroyed their great temple. That temple they were so proud of, the temple that God had a miracle in every year. Rome took it apart brick by brick, and stole all the sacred relics. The Ark of the Covenant has sort of been lost in history. I definitely believe that the Romans did steal it on this day, but what happened to it, we just don't know. But the Romans absolutely did steal the giant golden menorah. They brought it all the way back to Rome, and they melted it down and turned it into gold bars. So that was sort of a crushing cultural defeat for their second most important artifact. Another thing that's going to be a big issue, that's still an issue today in history, is that the Roman people tried to really wipe out the culture of the Jewish people. They changed the name of Israel. They rewrote it to the name Palestine. And there are some people today who do not want the Jews to return to the land of Israel, and those people still refer to that land as Palestine. So let's check out some more of these pictures here. Once again, fighting on the Temple Mount. There they are, stealing the giant menorah. Here's stealing the menorah again, breaking apart the temple. There's a Roman dude, start ripping it down brick by brick, or stone by stone, however you want to say it. And then this is something I visited. It's a sort of victory pillar that was constructed by the Romans shortly after they won. And this pillar is still in the city of Rome today. And here's a picture that I took while I was there. And you'll notice, what did the Romans carve on this pillar 2,000